In this video, we are going to discuss about loop control statements. In previous video, we have discussed about loops in Python. Now to control the flow of the loop or to alter the execution based on few specified condition, we may use the loop control statements. And the control statements are used to alter the execution based on those conditions. Now in Python, we have three control statements, and those are firstly break, continue, and pass. These are the three statements, loop control statements, which are there in Python. So firstly, let us discuss about break statement, that what is the use of break statement and what it exactly does. So break statement is used to terminate the execution of the loop containing it. That means it simply terminate the execution. Of loop. So if you want to terminate the execution of loop at a particular condition, then you can use this particular break statement. And the loop terminates and the execution transfers to the next statement of the following loop if there is any following loop of any other condition. Now what it will do is, firstly, it will test the expression which you are giving. Let's say this is the particular condition which we are giving and it is testing it. Now firstly, what it's going to do, if you transfer and this turns out to be this condition turns out to true, then what it does, if there is a break statement, then it will simply, if that statement turns out to be true and break is executed, then the program will end. The statement will below the loop and it will stop. Or else if it is not true, then the rest or the next statement will go to execute. And then it will again check with the condition and it will check if there is break or not. So if it is not true, then break is not execute, then remaining body of the loop will execute, or else the statement below the loop will execute if it turns out to be true and it exits from the loop. So this is how a break statement execute. And you can see the execution move to the statement below the loop. Here you can see this is the statement which is of another loop, or we can say below the loop. So this particular statement or this particular execution occurs. Now let us understand better with the help of example, with the help of break statement. So what we have done, I will do is that firstly I will initialize a list, and list, we know that we have studied about list. When we initialize a particular list, we use the square brackets, and there I am inputting several numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like this. Now I'm going to execute a for loop for this list, that for I in list, what we have to do is I'm here executing a conditional statement, that is if this I traversing variable is equals to 4, then what it has to do is it will simply break. That means terminate the execution of loop as it iterates 4 or as it checks for 4, and then print I up till that particular where the loop has been stopped executing. It will print up to that. So the output will be simply 1, 2, 3. This will be the output, because as this particular iterating variable by traversing that slit iterates 4, it will break and print the I which is up till that particular number. So that will print that particular iteration which it has traversed. So now let us execute this program and see how the output works. So firstly what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize a list with the help of square brackets and give the numbers as 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Next I am going to execute a for loop for this list, and for I in list, if I equals to 4, break, and what it has to do, it has to print I. Now as I execute this particular cell, you can see here it returns only 1, 2 and 3, because as the iterating variable checks the value as 4, then you have given a break statement, so it will terminate the execution of loop and print the next statement, that is print I. That means print the numbers which you have iterated till now, and it will break the execution of the loop. Next we are going to study about continue statement. Now the continue statement is used to skip the rest of the code in the loop for the current iteration. For example, we can say that in the last example we have only seen that we have iterated that if I equals to 4, then it will break. But if I write here continue statement, then what it will do? It will continue. It does not terminate the loop like the break statement and continues with the remaining iteration. It traverses or continues with the remaining collections which you have given. This is how continue statement execute. That means it will test a particular expression, and then if you have given and that condition turns out to be true, and if you have mentioned here continue statement, that what is going to do is it is going to check that yes, if there can be further iterations are there, then it will test for those, and for that which is given here, that which turns out to be no, that that particular statement doesn't needs to be continued, then it will execute the remaining portion. So it executes the remaining portion, unlike the break statement which completely terminates the loop. So it executes the remaining portion and it again checks with the body of the loop and tests with the expression. So when continue is encountered, it only skip the remaining loop for that iteration only. For example, it will skip for 4 only and traverse the rest of the list. So let us execute that particular code also and see how continue statement differ. So here only we have given the break statement, and in this particular loop only, if I write here continue, then what happens? And I execute this set of cell. Then you can see here it prints 1, 2, 3 and 5. That means it skips this particular iteration 4. That means if it turns out to be 1, then it doesn't print, it continues and prints the next iteration and checking again with the loop that I in list. So there is 5, then it is going to print 5. So continue doesn't actually breaks like the break statement, it doesn't terminates, it actually skips the iteration and continues with the rest of the iterations to execute. Next we are going to discuss about the pass statement. Now pass statement is Python is a null operation. It performs null operation. Now what exactly is that? It basically means that the statement is required syntactically, but you do not wish to execute any command or code with the help of pass statement. That means it simply passes and checks with the next iteration which is given in the loop. For example, if we have given a list of number which we have used in the previous 2 examples also, and in that particular example I execute a for loop that for I in list, I give as that if I modulus 2 equals to 0, then just pass, do nothing, and else what you have to do is print that I which is not divisible with 2, or the modulus doesn't returns 0. So simply pass will is a do nothing statement. So execute this program also and see the working of pass control statement. So here you can see I just incremented the number in the list and the for loop is still same, that for I in list. Next what I am going to write is that if I modulus 2 equals to 0, then pass do nothing statement it is, else what we have to do is print I. So this is just a very easy program, and as I execute this particular cell, it returns me those numbers which modulus division with 2 doesn't returns the remainder as 0. So that is 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. That means the odd numbers of this particular list. So pass statement does nothing. It means it is not going to print anything. It will simply execute the else statement that print those I in which the modulus division is not equals to 0. So this is how we can use the control statements of continue, pass and break with the help of loop. We have studied with the help of for loop. We can execute that with the help of while loop also, which we have studied in loop. So let us do one example with the help of while loop also. For example, firstly I am executing while loop with the help of continue statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking the input from the user, that is int input, and I write here enter num. So this will take an input from the user, and what it is going to check that if while num is greater than 0, it is going to check if num is greater than 0, then it will decrement num by 1. Okay, and if num is equals to 3, then what it has to do, it will continue and what it will do, it will print num up to that iteration, and lastly it is going to print number comma the last value of num. Okay, so this is a code which I have written for the while loop and with the help of continue statement. So what it is doing, it is firstly asking the user to enter a value, and that we will enter when we will execute this code, and while num is greater than 0, that means it will decrement the value of num with 1 minus 1 that it is doing, and if num encounters to be 3, then it will continue and execute the rest of the code. So let us execute this set of code, and you can see here it is asking me to enter a num. So firstly I am entering the value, that numerical value I am entering as 4. As I press enter, you can see the number turns out to be 2, 1 and 0. That means this particular iteration, when it is greater than 0, that is yes 4, it turns out in. Next num minus 1, it turns out to be 3. So it doesn't print 3, it simply continues and print the rest of the number, that is 2, 0 and 1, that number it print. This is how we can execute the continue statement with while loop also. Next, if I want to check that how can I execute break statement also with while loop. So what I'm going to do is, if simply I change this code here num equals to, let me write here, if it turns out to be is equal to 2, then what it is going to do, it will simply break. And again if I run this cell, then and I enter the number 4, same, then it just prints that the number is 3. Why? Because the break statement terminates the execution of the loop. That means further on all the iterations will be not checked, it will simply take exit from the loop. That's why only the number 3 is printed, because you have given here that when it encounters true, it will stop the execution of the loop further on. So this is the use of control statements which we have studied. And by the end of this video, we have discussed about pass, continue and break control statement with the help of both the loops, that is for loop and while loop.